My son wrote, "Don't expect me to take care of you in old age. I have my own life and family." I calmly replied, "Okay," and rewrote my will. When he found out about this, he burst into my house, and I'm glad you're here with me. Please like this video and listen to my story till the end, and let me know which city you're listening from. That way, I can see how far my story has traveled. I spent 32 years building a life I was proud of. My husband Robert and I raised our son David in a modest but comfortable home in Portland, Oregon. We weren't wealthy, but we were careful. We saved, invested wisely, paid off our mortgage early. When Robert passed away 5 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I inherited everything we'd built together: the house, his pension, our investments. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for me to live comfortably and perhaps leave something meaningful behind. David had always been a good son, or so I thought. He called regularly, visited on holidays, brought his wife Jessica and their 2 children. We had Sunday dinners. We celebrated birthdays. I helped them when I could, babysitting, the occasional financial gift when they needed a new roof, or when Jessica's car broke down. Was I being a grandmother, or was I being used? I didn't ask myself that question back then. The first crack appeared 6 months ago. David called, his voice tight with stress. They needed $15,000. Medical bills, he said. Jessica's mother had cancer treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. I didn't hesitate. I transferred the money the next day, but something nagged at me. When I mentioned Jessica's mother at our next dinner, asking how she was recovering, Jessica looked confused. "Recovering from what?" she asked. David jumped in quickly. Mom must have misunderstood it was preventive treatment, but the damage was done. I saw the lie in his eyes. I started paying attention, really paying attention. The way Jessica's face hardened when I mentioned my investment portfolio. The way David steered conversations toward my eventual plans. The casual suggestions about moving into assisted living. "You're getting older, Mom. Wouldn't it be easier?" I was 71 and ran 3 miles every morning. What did they think I needed assistance with? Then came the text message that changed everything. I was having coffee in my kitchen, the morning light streaming through the windows Robert had installed with his own hands, when my phone buzzed. David's name appeared on the screen. I smiled, expecting a photo of my grandchildren. Instead, I read words that felt like a slap across my face. "Don't expect me to take care of you when you're old. I have my own life and family." My hands trembled. I read it again and again. There was no context, no preceding argument. We'd had dinner just 3 days before. Everything had seemed normal. What had triggered this? Or had this resentment been simmering beneath the surface all along, hidden behind dutiful smiles and holiday visits? I sat there for nearly an hour, the coffee growing cold in my cup. How was I supposed to respond to this? Beg? Apologize for being a burden I hadn't even asked to be? Defend myself against accusations I didn't understand? Number one, I wouldn't do that. I took a deep breath, straightened my spine the way Robert always admired, and typed 2 words. "Okay, just that. Nothing more." I hit send and set the phone down. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. If David wanted to draw this line in the sand, I would respect it. But respect works both ways, doesn't it? That afternoon, I called my attorney, Thomas Chen. We'd worked together when Robert died, updating my will and estate planning. "Thomas," I said when he answered, "I need to revise my will. Can you fit me in this week?" "Of course, Margaret. Is everything all right?" "Everything is perfectly clear," I replied. And it was. For the first time in months, perhaps years, I saw my situation with absolute clarity. I wasn't going to be anyone's retirement plan, anyone's eventual payday. If David had his own life and family to worry about, then I had my own life and legacy to determine. I spent the next 2 days thinking carefully about what I wanted. Who deserved what I'd spent a lifetime building? The answer came easier than I expected. I drafted notes, made lists, researched charities. By the time I walked into Thomas's office on Thursday morning, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. What I didn't know was that David had access to my bank statements through an old joint account we'd set up years ago for emergencies. What I didn't know was that he checked it regularly. What I didn't know was that he'd see the payment to Chen and Associates, attorney at law. What I didn't know was how far he would go when he found out what I'd done. The meeting with Thomas took less than an hour. He didn't judge, didn't question my decisions. He simply listened, took notes, and promised to have the new documents ready for signing within a week. When I left his office, I felt lighter than I had in months. Was this what freedom felt like? The ability to choose my own path, even in death? I drove home through familiar streets, past the park where I'd pushed David on the swings, past the ice cream shop where we'd celebrated his graduation. The memories didn't hurt. They just existed now, separate from the present reality. People change. Relationships evolve. Sometimes they grow stronger. Sometimes they reveal themselves to be built on foundations less solid than we believed. Back home, I made myself lunch and tried to settle into my normal routine. But my mind kept circling back to that text message. Don't expect me to take care of you when you're old. The cruelty of it still stung. But beneath the hurt, I felt something else growing. Curiosity. What had prompted it? What did David really want? I pulled out my financial records and started reviewing them with fresh eyes. The $15,000 for Jessica's mother's treatment. $5,000 2 years ago for their vacation. No, David had called it a family emergency fund. $3,000 here, $7,000 there. Small enough amounts that I'd never questioned them, never added them up. But now, seeing them listed together, the pattern was undeniable. Over the past 4 years, I'd given them over $47,000. Had any of it been for what they claimed? Or had I been funding their lifestyle while they waited for the real payday? My death? My phone rang. David's name flashed on the screen. My stomach clenched. I let it ring twice, 3 times, before answering. Hello? Mom? His voice was tight. We need to talk. About what, sweetheart? I kept my tone neutral, pleasant. About your meeting with your lawyer. What's going on? So he knew. How? The joint account, of course. I'd forgotten about that old safety measure, set up when Robert first got sick, just in case I needed David to handle bills in an emergency. I'd meant to close it after Robert died, but never got around to it. That was careless of me. I wouldn't make that mistake again. Just updating some documents, I said. Routine estate planning. Nothing to worry about. Nothing to... Mom, you can't just change your will without discussing it with me. Something cold settled in my chest. Can't I? It's my will, David. My assets to distribute as I see fit. After everything I've done for you, after all the time I've spent taking care of you? Taking care of me? I almost laughed. David, I live independently. I manage my own home, my own finances, my own life. What exactly have you taken care of? That's not. You know what I mean. I'm your son. I'm family. Yes, I said quietly. You are. And family doesn't send text messages telling their elderly mother not to expect care or support. Silence. Then, I was upset. I didn't mean, you meant it, I interrupted. And I'm respecting your wishes. You have your own life and family. I have mine. Mom, don't do this. Don't be stupid about this. Stupid. He called me stupid. I closed my eyes, counted to 5. I have to go, David. I have an appointment. Mom! I hung up. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from anger, from the realization that I'd spent years being manipulated by someone I'd raised, loved, sacrificed for. How long had he seen me as nothing more than a bank account with a heartbeat? I needed a plan. Not just updating my will, that was done. But I needed to protect myself, protect my assets, make sure that whatever I'd built couldn't be contested or challenged. Thomas had mentioned something about living trusts, about irrevocable transfers. I needed to understand my options. But more than that, I needed to understand what I was dealing with. Was David just greedy? Or was there something more calculated happening? Was Jessica driving this? Or were they partners in it? And how far would they go? I spent the evening researching elder financial abuse, undue influence, estate litigation. The stories I found online were horrifying. Children draining their parents' accounts, forging documents, even hastening death to access inheritances sooner. Could my own son be capable of such things? I didn't want to believe it. But that text message sat in my phone like evidence I couldn't ignore. He'd shown me who he was. I needed to believe him. By midnight, I had the outline of a plan. I would document everything, keep records, build a case if I needed one. And I would make changes, strategic, deliberate changes, that would protect what was mine and ensure it went to people and causes that actually deserved it. David wanted his own life? Fine, he could have it, without my money funding it. The next morning, I returned to Thomas's office with a new purpose. I want to set up a living trust, I told him, and I want to transfer my primary assets into it immediately. Thomas leaned back in his chair, studying me over his glasses. Margaret, that's a significant step. Once assets are in an irrevocable trust, you can't easily access them. Are you sure? I'm 71, Thomas. I have a pension, Social Security, and more than enough in my checking account to live comfortably for years. The house, the investment accounts, I don't need them liquid. I need them protected. He nodded slowly. Protected from whom? From anyone who might try to claim I was incompetent or unduly influenced when I made my final wishes known. I met his gaze steadily. From my son. There, I'd said it out loud. The truth I'd been dancing around for days. Thomas didn't look surprised. I'll draw up the papers, he said. But Margaret, this will take time. And if David has access to your financial information, I'm closing that account today. I'll open a new checking account at a different bank. He won't see another transaction. Good, but be prepared. When he notices the transfers to the trust, he'll know something significant has happened. Let him know, I said. I'm not hiding. I'm just protecting what's mine. I left Thomas's office and drove directly to Pacific Northwest Bank, where Robert and I had maintained accounts for 30 years. I closed the joint account with David, opened a new individual account, and arranged for all my automatic payments to transfer over. The bank manager, Patricia, whom I'd known for years, processed everything efficiently, but gave me a concerned look. Mrs. Morrison, is everything all right? It's unusual to close accounts like this. Everything is fine, Patricia. Just simplifying my finances. I smiled, but she didn't look convinced. By Thursday of that week, the trust documents were ready. Thomas had worked quickly, and I appreciated his discretion. The Margaret Morrison Living Trust would hold my house, my investment portfolio, and my savings. Everything except the checking account I needed for daily expenses. The beneficiaries were carefully chosen: a scholarship fund at Robert's old university, the animal shelter where we'd adopted our beloved dog Max, the children's hospital, and a small bequest to my niece Emma, who'd stayed in touch over the years without ever asking for anything. David's name appeared nowhere in the document. I signed the papers in Thomas's office with his paralegal and secretary as witnesses. When it was done, Thomas shook my hand. The transfers will take about a week to complete. After that, these assets are locked in. You can't change the beneficiaries without dissolving the entire trust. I understand, I said. Thank you, Thomas. That evening, David called again. I didn't answer. He called 3 more times. On the 5th call, I finally picked up. Where have you been? His voice was sharp with anxiety. I've been trying to reach you for days. I've been busy, I said calmly. What do you need, David? Mom? Your bank account is gone. I tried to check on your finances and the account doesn't exist anymore. So he had been monitoring me regularly. The violation of that felt like a physical blow. I closed it, I said. It was time to streamline my banking. Streamline? Mom, what's going on? First the lawyer, now this? Are you sick? Is something wrong? Was I sick? The concern in his voice might have touched me a week ago. Now I heard only the fear beneath it. Fear that his inheritance was slipping away. I'm perfectly healthy, David. I'm just organizing my affairs. It's what responsible adults do. Organizing Jesus, Mom, you're acting paranoid. Has someone been talking to you, telling you things about me? The only person who told me anything about you was you, I said quietly. Remember? Don't expect me to take care of you. I have my own life and family. I explained that. I was stressed. I didn't mean... You meant every word. My voice was steady. And I'm simply respecting your boundaries. You don't want the responsibility of caring for me. Fine. That also means you don't get the benefits. What benefits? What are you talking about? Good night, David. I hung up before he could respond. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My heart wasn't racing. I felt calm, clear. For the first time in my 71 years, I was truly putting myself first, and it felt like breathing after being underwater. 2 days later, on a Saturday morning, I was in my garden pruning roses when I heard a car screech into my driveway. The car door slammed. Footsteps pounded up my walkway. I didn't even have time to stand up before David burst through my garden gate, his face red with fury. "What the hell have you done?" he shouted. I set down my pruning shears carefully and looked up at him. "Lower your voice. The neighbors can hear you." "I don't care about the neighbors. I just got off the phone with your bank. They said you've transferred almost everything. Everything, Mom. Where did it go?" "Into a trust. It's none of your concern." "None of my..." He stepped closer, looming over me. "That money was supposed to be mine. Dad worked his whole life for that." "Dad worked his whole life for us," I corrected. "For our family. For our life together. He's gone now, and it's my money. Mine to do with as I please. You can't do this. I'll fight it. I'll prove you're not competent." I stood up then, meeting his eyes. "Try it. I have medical records showing I'm in perfect health. I have witnesses to my sound mind. I have documentation of every decision I've made. What do you have, David?" "A text message telling me you won't take care of me." His face went pale. "You don't understand. We need that money. We've been counting on it." "For what?" I asked. "What do you need it for so desperately?" He didn't answer. He just stared at me, and in that moment, I saw it. The calculation, the resentment, the ugly truth of what I'd become to him. Not his mother. His retirement plan. "Get out of my house," I said quietly, "and don't come back unless you're invited." He left. But I knew this wasn't over. I'd crossed a line, and David wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. I went inside, locked my doors, and called Thomas. "It started," I told him. I need to know what my legal protections are. Thomas worked fast. By Monday morning, I had copies of all my legal documents in a safe deposit box at my new bank, digital backups on a secure cloud service, and a letter he'd drafted outlining my mental competency and the voluntary nature of all my decisions. He also suggested something I hadn't considered: a letter to David, formally documented and notarized, explaining my choices. If this escalates to litigation, Thomas explained, it helps to have a clear record of your reasoning. Not emotional, just factual. I spent Tuesday afternoon writing that letter. It was harder than I expected. How do you explain to your child that they've failed you without sounding bitter? How do you document betrayal in legal language? In the end, I kept it simple. David, this letter confirms that I, Margaret Ann Morrison, being of sound mind and body, have chosen to establish a living trust and designate beneficiaries according to my own wishes. This decision is based on your stated unwillingness to provide care or support in my later years, as communicated to me on date. I respect your right to prioritize your own family, and I am exercising my right to prioritize my own legacy. This is not a punishment. This is self-preservation. I had it notarized at the bank. Patricia witnessed my signature, along with another bank officer I'd never met. No one could claim I'd been coerced or confused. That Wednesday, David came back. This time he brought Jessica. I heard their car pull up around 2 in the afternoon. I was reading in my living room, a cup of tea growing cold on the side table. When the doorbell rang, I considered not answering. But hiding would only delay the inevitable. Jessica stood on my porch in an expensive coat. I was fairly certain I'd helped pay for with one of those emergency loans. Her smile was tight, controlled. Margaret, we need to talk. Can we come in? No, I said. We can talk here. Mom, don't be ridiculous, David started. I'm not being ridiculous. You showed up at my house without calling. You barged into my garden and shouted at me, and now you expect hospitality? Say what you need to say from the porch. Jessica's smile faltered. Fine. We're here because we're worried about you. David told me about these sudden financial changes, and honestly, Margaret, it's concerning. People your age can be vulnerable to scams, to manipulation. Are you suggesting I've been scammed? We're saying you're not thinking clearly, David interjected. Mom, you've never made rash decisions like this before. Moving all your money around, cutting us out. I haven't cut you out of anything you were ever entitled to. You cut yourself out when you made it clear I was a burden you didn't want. I never said that. I pulled out my phone, called up the text message, and held it out. Read it again. Don't expect me to take care of you when you're old. I have my own life and family. Your words, David. Dated. Time stamped. Saved. Jessica's eyes widened. She turned to David. You sent that? He flushed. I was upset. She'd been asking about money for her roof repairs, and I'd just lost a client, and it doesn't matter. She's my mother. She can't just disinherit me. Actually, I said calmly, I can, and I have. Not out of spite, David, out of self-respect. You made it clear what our relationship means to you. I'm simply honoring that. This is about money, Jessica said suddenly, her voice cold. You think we only care about money? We've been here for you. We visit, we call, we include you in our lives. Quote, you visit 4 times a year, you call when you need something, and you included me in your lives as long as I was funding them. I looked at Jessica directly. How is your mother, by the way? Recovered from that cancer treatment I paid for? She went silent. David grabbed her arm. We don't have to listen to this. Mom, you have 1 week to reconsider. 1 week to reverse these ridiculous changes. If you don't, I'm contacting a lawyer. I'll have you declared incompetent. I'll fight this trust. I'll make sure everyone knows what you're doing. Go ahead. I said. I have a lawyer too, a very good one. And I have documentation you can't fight. Medical records, witness statements, a paper trail showing your financial exploitation. Try me, David, please. They left. Jessica was crying. David was silent, his jaw clenched. I watched them drive away and felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not regret. Just a quiet determination. But that night, lying in bed, the fear crept in. What if David did get a lawyer? What if he convinced a judge I was incompetent? I'd heard horror stories of adult children getting guardianship, taking control of their parents' lives. Could that happen to me? I barely slept. By morning, I was exhausted and shaking. I called Thomas again. He's threatening legal action, I told him. Can he actually do this? He can try, Thomas said carefully. But Margaret, you have something most people in your situation don't. Preparation. We've documented everything. Your medical records are pristine. You have witnesses. Unless David can prove actual incompetence, which he can't, he has no case. But the stress of fighting it. I know. Which is why I'm suggesting you take a few days for yourself. Go somewhere peaceful. Stay with a friend. Let David exhaust himself making threats while you restore your energy. You're going to need it. He was right. I called my friend Linda, whom I'd known since college. She lived 2 hours away in a beach town, ran a small bookstore, and had always offered me a standing invitation. Come stay with me, she said immediately when I explained, in general terms, what was happening. Bring nothing but comfortable clothes and a good attitude. We'll walk on the beach and remind you what peace feels like. I packed a bag and left Thursday morning. I didn't tell David where I was going. I just left. For 3 days, I walked on the beach. I helped Linda in her bookstore. I read novels I'd been meaning to get to for years. I slept deeply, dreamlessly. And I remembered who I was beyond being David's mother. I was Margaret, a woman who'd built a life, loved deeply, survived loss, and deserved respect. When I returned home on Sunday evening, I felt ready for whatever came next. The letter was waiting when I got home, not in my mailbox, slipped under my front door. Expensive stationery, Jessica's handwriting. Dear Margaret, I hope you'll forgive David's outburst. He's under so much stress at work, and when he's stressed, he says things he doesn't mean. We both know how much he loves you. We want to make this right. We'd like to take you to dinner this Friday, your favorite restaurant. Let's talk like family, not like adversaries. We miss you. The children miss you. Charlie keeps asking why Grandma doesn't come over anymore. Please, give us a chance to fix this. Love, Jessica. I read it twice. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. Invoke the grandchildren. Appeal to sentiment. Frame David's cruelty as a stress response. Suggest I was the one creating the adversarial situation. It was a masterclass in guilt tripping. The old Margaret might have wavered. Might have thought, maybe I'm being too harsh. Maybe I should hear them out. The new Margaret, the one who'd spent 3 days remembering her own worth, simply placed the letter in a folder labeled documentation and made a note of the date. 2 days later, flowers arrived. 2 dozen roses with a card. Mom, I'm sorry. Let's talk. David. I photographed the card, added it to my documentation folder, and donated the flowers to the nursing home down the street. The staff was delighted. I didn't mention who they were from. Then came the phone calls. Not angry ones this time. Pleading ones. Jessica called first, her voice soft and conciliatory. Margaret, please, we made mistakes. Can't we move past this? Family is supposed to forgive. Family is also supposed to respect each other, I replied. To treat each other with basic decency. To not view each other as ATM machines. That's not fair. We never. Jessica, I have records of every penny I've given you over the past 4 years. $47,000 for emergencies that never quite got explained. Should we go through them together? She hung up. David tried next. His approach was different. Wounded, confused. Mom, I don't understand what's happened to you. You've changed. You're not the person who raised me. You're right, I said. The person who raised you was a doormat who prioritized everyone else's needs above her own dignity. I'm not her anymore. That's not, Mom, please, just have dinner with us, one dinner. If you still feel the same way after, fine. But give us a chance. I almost said yes. Not because I believed them, but because I was tired. Because saying no over and over was exhausting. Because some small part of me still wanted to believe my son could change. But then I remembered that text message. The pure, undiluted contempt in those words. Don't expect me to take care of you. He'd shown me the truth. Why was I doubting what I'd seen? No, David, we're done. You made your choice. I'm making mine. You're going to regret this. Is that a threat? Silence. Then, it's a prediction. He hung up. I sat in my kitchen, hands folded on the table, breathing slowly. Was I doing the right thing? Or was I letting pride destroy what remained of my family? I called Linda. She listened to the whole story. The letters, the flowers, the phone calls. They're trying to wear you down, she said. It's a classic manipulation tactic. They're not actually sorry, Margaret. They're just sorry they're losing access to your money. But what if I'm wrong? What if I'm being too harsh? Did they apologize for the text message? I thought about it. David had said he was stressed, that he didn't mean it. But he'd never actually said, I'm sorry for hurting you. I was wrong. Neither had Jessica. No, I said slowly. They've apologized for my reaction to it, not for doing it. There's your answer. She was right. And I needed more than Linda's support. I needed community. I needed to remember that David and Jessica weren't my only family. I started attending my church group again. I'd let it lapse after Robert died. I reconnected with old friends I'd neglected. I called my niece Emma, who drove down from Seattle the following weekend and took me to lunch. Emma listened to everything, her young face serious. At 28, she was closer to David's age than mine, but she understood what I couldn't say to my peers. Aunt Margaret, she finally said, some people are takers. They don't see relationships as mutual. They see them as transactions. It sounds like David and Jessica are takers. He's my son, I whispered. I know, and that makes it hurt worse. But you're still allowed to protect yourself. The support helped. Every conversation, every coffee date, every church service reminded me that I wasn't alone, that I wasn't crazy, that setting boundaries didn't make me a bad person. By the end of the second week, the calls from David and Jessica had stopped. The silence was both a relief and unsettling. What were they planning? Were they consulting lawyers? Or had they finally accepted my decision? I should have known better than to hope for acceptance. They appeared on a Sunday morning, 3 weeks after my return from Linda's. I was having breakfast when I heard voices in my driveway. David's, Jessica's, and the children's high-pitched excitement. My grandchildren. They'd brought my grandchildren. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. Charlie, 6 years old, ran forward. Grandma, we brought you cookies. Mom said you weren't feeling well. My heart clenched. I hugged him, breathing in his little boy smell, grass and fruit snacks. His sister, Mia, 4, hung back shyly, then came forward for her hug too. Over their heads, I met David's eyes. He smiled, but it didn't reach his expression. We thought we'd surprise you, Jessica said brightly. It's such a beautiful day. We could have a family picnic in your backyard, just like old times. You should have called first, I said carefully, pulling back from the children. Grandma, don't you want to see us? Charlie's voice was confused, hurt. What was I supposed to say to that? That yes, I wanted to see him, but not as a manipulation tool? That I loved him desperately, but his parents had poisoned our relationship by using him as leverage? Of course I want to see you, sweetheart. But grown-ups should always call before visiting. We did call, David said. You didn't answer. Because I'd seen his name and let it go to voicemail. Because I needed to protect my peace. Come on, Mom, let us in. The kids are excited to spend time with their grandma, unless you're going to turn away your own grandchildren. His tone was light, but the threat underneath was clear. Reject us, and you're rejecting them. I stepped aside. What choice did I have? They settled in my living room, the children on the floor with coloring books Jessica had conveniently brought. David and Jessica on my sofa like they owned it. Jessica unpacked a container of homemade cookies, which she knew were my favorite. David commented on how nice the house looked, how well I was maintaining it. Every word was calculated. So, Jessica said after 20 minutes of painful small talk, we've been thinking about everything that's happened, and we want to apologize. We do, David echoed. Mom, we handled this badly. I never should have sent that text. I was frustrated about work, about money stress, and I took it out on you. I'm sorry. It sounded rehearsed, but the children were coloring 10 feet away, and I was supposed to believe this was genuine. What exactly are you sorry for? I asked. Jessica blinked. For hurting you. For making you feel like we didn't care. But do you care, or do you care about my money? David's jaw tightened. That's not fair, isn't it? You've called me incompetent, threatened to sue me, and now you're sitting in my living room expecting what? That I'll undo my trust because you brought the kids and some cookies? We're trying to make amends, Jessica said, her voice hardening slightly. We're trying to be family, but you're making it impossible. I'm making it impossible? I set a boundary after you explicitly told me you wouldn't take care of me. I protected my assets after years of unexplained emergencies that drained my savings. And I'm the problem? Lower your voice, David hissed. The kids are right there. Then maybe you shouldn't have brought them to this conversation. Jessica stood abruptly. Charlie, Mia, why don't you go play in the backyard? Grandma has a lovely garden. The children scampered out, oblivious to the tension. The moment the door closed, Jessica's mask dropped. Let's stop pretending, she said coldly. You're being selfish and vindictive. You have more money than you'll ever need, and you're hoarding it while your own family struggles. Struggles? You drive a Mercedes. Your children go to private school. Where exactly is the struggle? That's none of your business, David snapped. But my money is your business? We're your family. After everything we've done. What have you done? I stood up, matching his energy. Name one thing you've done for me in the past 5 years that wasn't motivated by eventual inheritance. They couldn't. The silence was damning. This is what's going to happen, David said, his voice low and dangerous. You're going to call your lawyer. You're going to dissolve that trust. You're going to restore our inheritance. And you're going to do it by the end of the month. Or what? Or you'll never see your grandchildren again. Jessica delivered the threat calmly, like she was discussing the weather. We'll move if we have to. We'll tell them you didn't want to see them, that you chose money over family. The words hit like a physical blow. My grandchildren. The thought of never seeing Charlie's gap-toothed smile, never hearing Mia's off-key singing. But even through the pain, I saw the manipulation for what it was. The ultimate weapon, the children. They'd use them, hurt them, sacrifice their relationships with me, all to get money. Get out, I said quietly. Mom, get out of my house, now. And if you ever use those children as leverage again, I'll document it. I'll make sure any judge who sees it understands exactly what kind of parents you are. David's face went purple with rage. You're going to regret this, I promise you. The only thing I regret is not seeing who you really were years ago." They left, snatching the children from the backyard with barely a goodbye. Charlie's confused, but Grandma was cut off by the car door slamming. I watched them drive away, my whole body shaking. Had I just lost my grandchildren? Would David really follow through? The thought made me physically ill. I ran to the bathroom and dry heaved over the toilet, my body rebelling against the stress. But beneath the fear, something else burned. Fury. How dare they? How dare they use innocent children as pawns? I wouldn't back down. I couldn't. Because if I did, what message would that send? That I could be manipulated? That threats worked? That they could treat me however they wanted as long as they held my grandchildren hostage? Number, I called Thomas. They threatened to cut me off from my grandchildren unless I reversed the trust. His response was immediate. Document everything. Write down exactly what was said. If they follow through, we may need that for custody considerations later. Custody. The word made my heart race. But he was right. This was war now, and I needed to fight smart. The lawyer's letter arrived 3 weeks later, not from Thomas, from David's attorney. A firm downtown with a reputation for aggressive family litigation. Mrs. Morrison, our client David Morrison, has retained our services regarding questions about your mental competency and recent financial decisions made under potential duress or diminished capacity. We respectfully request that you submit to an independent psychiatric evaluation. I read it calmly, sitting in my kitchen with my morning coffee. So this was how he wanted to play it. Fine. I called Thomas immediately. They're going for incompetency. They want a psych evaluation. Let them. Thomas sounded almost pleased. Margaret, you're one of the sharpest people I know. You pass any evaluation they throw at you, and their case collapses. But we need to be strategic. Agree to the evaluation, but insist on selecting the psychiatrist from a court-approved list. We control the process. Within a week, I was sitting across from Dr. Patricia Hernandez, a forensic psychiatrist who specialized in elder competency cases. She was professional, thorough, and impossible to charm or manipulate. For 3 hours, she asked me questions about my life history, my education, my financial decisions, my relationship with David. She gave me cognitive tests, memory assessments, logic puzzles. She reviewed my medical records. She interviewed my doctor. When we finished, she made a few notes and looked at me directly. Mrs. Morrison, I'll file my formal report with the court, but I can tell you now, there is absolutely no evidence of cognitive decline, diminished capacity, or undue influence. Your decisions, while perhaps unusual from a family dynamics perspective, are entirely rational and well considered. Thank you, I said. And off the record? She leaned forward slightly. I've seen this pattern before. Adult children who've positioned themselves as eventual heirs react badly when parents exercise autonomy. What you're experiencing is financial elder abuse, just in reverse. They're trying to abuse you into compliance. Her words validated everything I'd felt but been afraid to name. The competency hearing was scheduled for November 15th in a gray courtroom that smelled like old wood and anxiety. David and Jessica sat across the aisle with their attorney, a slick man in an expensive suit. They didn't look at me. I sat with Thomas wearing my best suit, my hair neat, my hands steady. David's attorney went first. He painted a picture of a grief-stricken widow, vulnerable and isolated, making erratic financial decisions without family consultation. He implied I'd been influenced by my attorney. Thomas remained impassive. He suggested early-stage dementia. Then Dr. Hernandez took the stand. She destroyed their case in 15 minutes. She detailed my perfect cognitive scores, my comprehensive understanding of my financial situation, my clear articulation of my reasoning. She noted that I managed my own household, drove independently, maintained an active social life, and showed zero signs of impairment. In fact, she said, looking directly at the judge, Mrs. Morrison demonstrates above-average financial literacy and logical reasoning for her age group. Her decisions, while emotionally difficult for family members, are entirely competent and autonomous. David's attorney tried to recover. But isn't it unusual for a mother to completely disinherit her only child? Unusual, perhaps, but not incompetent. Mrs. Morrison has clear, documented reasons for her choices. Whether those choices align with her son's preferences is irrelevant to her mental capacity. The judge, a woman in her 60s, looked at David over her glasses. Mr. Morrison, why did you send your mother a text message stating, and I quote, "Don't expect me to take care of you when you're old. I have my own life and family"? David's face went red. He stammered. I was upset. She was asking about money. So you were upset about money, and now you're upset that she's distributing her money according to her own wishes rather than yours. It's not that simple. It seems quite simple to me. The judge turned to me. Mrs. Morrison, has anyone coerced you into these financial decisions? No, Your Honor. Are you aware of what you're doing and the consequences? Completely aware. Do you wish to make any changes to your estate plan? No, Your Honor. My plan is exactly as I want it. She banged her gavel. Petition for incompetency is denied. Mrs. Morrison is clearly of sound mind and has every right to manage her estate as she sees fit. Case dismissed. David's attorney gathered his papers quickly. Jessica looked stunned. But David was staring at me with pure hatred. As we filed out of the courtroom, he grabbed my arm in the hallway. This isn't over. Thomas stepped between us immediately. Mr. Morrison, that could be construed as harassment. I'd suggest you walk away. David released my arm but leaned close. You're making a huge mistake, Mother. When you're old and sick and alone, don't come crying to me. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger. When had I lost my son? Or had he never been the person I thought he was? David, I said quietly, I won't be alone. I have friends. I have community. I have self-respect. What do you have? Besides greed? He walked away without answering. I should have felt triumphant. I'd won, but all I felt was empty. Thomas put a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing. Then why does it hurt so much? Because love and betrayal can exist simultaneously. He's still your son. You're allowed to grieve that. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. But as we walked out of the courthouse into the autumn sunlight, I felt something shift inside me. The doubt was gone. The guilt was gone. What remained was clarity. I had won, and I wasn't done yet. 2 months after the hearing, I received a registered letter from David and Jessica's mortgage company. They'd missed 3 payments. The bank was beginning foreclosure proceedings. How did I find out? Because they'd listed me as an emergency contact years ago and never updated it. So they were struggling financially, badly. The expensive car, the private school, the lifestyle they'd maintained, it was all built on debt. And they'd been counting on my inheritance to bail them out. Part of me felt a flicker of sympathy. They had children. Charlie and Mia shouldn't suffer because their parents made bad choices. But I remembered Jessica's cold threat. You'll never see your grandchildren again. I remembered David's hatred in that courtroom hallway. I remembered years of manipulation disguised as need. I made a decision. I called a private investigator, a retired police detective Thomas had recommended for estate matters. I need you to look into my son's finances, I told him. Everything. Where the money went. What they spent it on. I want documentation. What he found was staggering. Over the past 6 years, David and Jessica had spent over $200,000 beyond their means. Not on necessities. On vacations to Europe. A boat they'd used twice. Jessica's cosmetic surgery. Country club memberships. Private school tuition they couldn't afford. And here was the kicker. They'd taken out loans against their expected inheritance from me. Multiple loans. From different lenders. They'd been so confident I'd die and leave them everything that they'd borrowed against it. The investigator also found something else: emails. David had been corresponding with an estate attorney years ago, asking about ways to expedite inheritance in cases where parents were difficult. The attorney had refused to engage, but the emails existed. I sat in Thomas's office reading through the report, feeling sick. He was planning this for years. It appears so, Thomas said carefully. Margaret, I need to ask, do you want to pursue this? We have evidence of fraud, possible elder financial exploitation. We could press charges. I thought about it. Watching my son in handcuffs, my grandchildren visiting their father in prison, the scandal, the publicity. No, I said finally. No criminal charges. But I want them to know I know. I want them to understand they lost. Thomas helped me draft a letter. It was delivered by courier to David's house on a Tuesday morning. David and Jessica, I am now in possession of complete financial records showing your spending patterns, your loans against my anticipated estate, and your communications regarding expediting my inheritance. I also have documentation of your threats to deny me access to my grandchildren, your false claims of my incompetency, and your harassment. I want to be clear. I will not be providing you with financial assistance now or ever. Your mortgage crisis is your own to solve. Your debts are your own to repay. Your financial choices are your own consequences. However, I am not cruel. Attached, you will find contact information for financial counseling services, debt consolidation resources, and family therapy options. I recommend you use them. My estate plan remains unchanged. Upon my death, my assets will be distributed as specified in my trust. You will receive nothing. I do, however, have one final offer. If, at any point, you genuinely apologize, not because you want something, but because you actually recognize the harm you've caused, and if you are willing to rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial expectation, my door is open. Not to my checkbook, to my heart. But that decision is yours to make. Margaret. I heard nothing for 3 weeks. Then, on Christmas Eve, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find Charlie and Mia on my doorstep, holding a woman's hand I didn't recognize. David's car was parked on the street, but he didn't get out. The woman introduced herself as a court-appointed supervisor for family visits. David and Jessica, it turned out, had lost their house. They'd had to move in with Jessica's parents in another state. As part of their bankruptcy proceedings, they'd had to agree to allow me supervised visitation with the grandchildren. They hadn't done it out of kindness. The court had ordered it after someone, I suspected Thomas, had filed a complaint about grandparent visitation rights. But I didn't care about their motives. I had my grandchildren for 2 hours. We baked cookies. We read stories. We played in the snow that had started falling softly outside. When they left, Mia hugged me tight. Grandma, can we come back? Anytime, sweetheart, anytime. I watched the car drive away. David never once looking at my house. I had won. Not the way I'd wanted to. I'd wanted my son back, whole and loving and real. But I'd won on the terms that mattered. My autonomy, my dignity, my peace. And sometimes that's the only victory available. 6 months later, spring arrived in Portland with an explosion of cherry blossoms and clear, bright mornings. I started each day with my 3-mile run, feeling stronger than I had in years. My new doctor said I had the cardiovascular health of someone 15 years younger. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it, she said with a smile. What I was doing was living. Really, fully living. I'd joined a book club at Linda's recommendation, a group of women ranging from their 50s to 80s who met weekly to discuss literature and life. We became close friends. Their support was unwavering. I'd also started volunteering at the Children's Hospital, one of the beneficiaries of my trust. I read to kids undergoing treatment, played games with them, offered comfort to worried parents. It gave me purpose and filled the grandmother-shaped hole in my heart that David and Jessica had created. The scholarship fund at Roberts University had already helped 3 students. I received thank you letters from them, heartfelt, genuine expressions of gratitude that made me cry happy tears. This was legacy. This was meaning. My niece Emma and I had grown closer. She visited monthly, and we'd developed a real friendship. "You're the wisest person I know, Aunt Margaret," she told me once. Coming from someone who barely knew me a year ago, it meant everything. I'd made peace with my choices. Yes, I grieved the relationship with David I'd hoped we'd have, but I didn't regret protecting myself. I'd learned that loving someone doesn't mean allowing them to abuse you. That family isn't defined by blood, but by mutual respect and care. My house was full of friends, laughter, purpose. I had season tickets to the symphony with my book club. I'd started painting again and had actually sold 2 pieces at a local gallery. I traveled to visit Linda monthly. I'd even gone on a cruise to Alaska with my church group. This was the life I deserved. Meanwhile, David and Jessica's situation had deteriorated further. I didn't seek out information, that would be petty. But in a city like Portland, word gets around. They'd declared bankruptcy. They'd moved into a cramped apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. Jessica had had to get a job for the first time in years, retail work. David had lost his business entirely and was working as a sales associate at an electronics store. The children had been pulled from private school. The boat had been repossessed. The Mercedes replaced with a 10-year-old sedan. They'd built their entire lives on money they didn't have, banking on an inheritance they'd never earned. And when that foundation collapsed, everything went with it. I felt sad more than satisfied. Sad that they'd wasted years chasing wealth instead of building genuine relationships. Sad that my grandchildren were suffering the consequences of their parents' greed. But I'd learned something crucial. You can't save people from themselves. All you can do is protect yourself and build a life worth living. The supervised visits with Charlie and Mia continued every month. "Why don't we see you more, Grandma?" Charlie had asked last visit. "Because sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt people they love. But I want you to know something important. I will always love you. Always. And whenever you need me, I'll be here. Even when we're grown up, especially when you're grown up." When they turned 18, they'd each find a letter waiting for them, explaining everything, offering support for college, and making sure they knew they were loved. Not by a desperate grandmother trying to buy affection, but by a woman who valued herself enough to demand respect, and who hoped to teach them to do the same. Looking back now, I understand what that text message gave me. Freedom. Freedom to see clearly, to choose myself, to build a life based on dignity rather than obligation. I learned that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's self-preservation, that you can love someone and still refuse to be manipulated by them. That true family is built on respect, not biology. My legacy isn't in a bank account someone inherits. It's in the students who'll get educated, the sick children who'll be comforted, the relationships I built based on mutual care. What would you do if someone you loved saw you only as a paycheck? Would you have the courage to walk away? Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives someone else the strength to choose themselves, because you deserve respect. Always. My son wrote, "Don't expect me to take care of